Hello and welcome to Tuesday's 10-minute topic. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Dr. Tommy John, and we are talking about youth sports injuries and why parents need to rethink what they have already learned. And this is a super important topic, Dr. John, and one that unfortunately a lot of parents don't think about until it happens to them. And believe me, it will. If it hasn't happened already, it will. Many of you have heard of his dad, Tommy John, a pitcher for 26 years in the major leagues. He's also the first player to have a groundbreaking surgery to repair his elbow that's actually named after him now, the Tommy John surgery. And you've basically dedicated your life to working with athletes. You worked with pitchers for many years, and now you've dedicated it to helping young athletes in performance, but even more importantly, in prevention. So tell us a little bit about how and why you got started.
So I was in rehab and personal training, and then I was also doing baseball lessons. I logged over 11,000 baseball lessons along with personal training, sports performance, and rehab. And what I started to notice was the things that were happening in the 50 or 60 or 70-year-old, these chronic conditions were starting to show up in these 10, 11, 12-year-olds in all sports, not just baseball. And I'm a big why guy, so I was scratching my head trying to figure out what the cause was, what's going on. And it was much more than mechanics. It was much more than just controlling when they play, how much they play. It was a deeper level. That's why I ended up going and getting my chiropractic degree, put it all together. And now I'm in San Diego, and I have a performance and healing center. And basically, it's just we're all human athletes. We're all trying to do things in life. When we can't adapt to those forces of life, that's when dysfunction shows up or disease. And so I'm basically just a tutor or a guide to show these people any age from 9-year-old to 86-year-old with MS and osteoporosis or a pro athlete, what's in the way from preventing them from being their best self, and how they can heal from the ground up and perform at anything they desire to do.
And before we get to your four-pronged attack on this, which is fascinating, we're going to do one of them today, and we're going to have you back and do the other three. But tell us a little bit about the injury rise in youth sports.
So it's not single facet. There's not a single sport out there that is experiencing these. Concussions are up a couple hundred% as we're hearing this. ACL surgeries have increased 3% per year over the last 20 years in 6 to 18-year-olds. Tommy John surgeries, 57% of them or so, that's the bulk of all Tommy John surgeries, are happening between 15 and 19-year-olds. There's so much going on in all sports, so it's not a specific sport problem, it's a cultural problem that we're looking at. The soft tissue repair industry, that's surgeries, is expected to hit $17 billion by the year 2022, with the main driver, and they specifically say this in a study, with the main driver being youth sports participation. Something's off.
It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. Well, let's dive in. This is supposed to be a 10-minute topic. We might go a little bit over today. So you're going to have a book coming out in the summer that will include all of this because there's a lot of information. But today we're talking about rethinking. There's 4 prongs. Let me see here. Or tell us really quick. It's rethink, replenish. What are the other 2?
Rebuild and recover.
Okay, and today we're doing rethink. And this is by far like the one you need to start with, and it's so important for parents to think about this stuff. So we picked out 10 of them. We're going to start with number 1. What are the 3 real causes behind the injury epidemic?
So what we need to look at is the business of youth sports. It's over $15 billion a year industry. So the business that's driving youth sports. In addition to the American lifestyle, the American dream, it's we want it now, we want it fast. Who cares how long it sustains? Let's go right now. We're overfed, malnourished. We're overstimulated, less aware. We're overcoached and underdeveloped. It's a culmination of all these. And then the third aspect is parents need to realize where the parents are kind of pushing and driving and need to realize what needs to change to create a healthier athlete. Okay,
so those are the 3 causes. Let's jump into what some of the things we're doing wrong. And I see we have a few comments already. Dustin, can you explain how overseas many people play soccer year round and overuse injuries aren't as much of a common problem. Do you have an answer for that, Dr. John?
That's what's so great is that there is a way that we should be developing. And again, sports are just something that our development should kind of reward us with, but we're not developed from the ground up. As we'll get into these 10 points, we're from our nourishment to our recovery to our abuse of technology to things that we're doing in the American training system to increase ability at the expense of durability. How we are operating here is not the same as how we're operating in other countries. So it's a different athlete participating in these sports. Therefore, you're not seeing the rise of the injuries as we're seeing in America.
Okay, awesome. All right, number 2, what are coaches doing wrong?
So a lot of the times it's again, training to express a skill trait earlier. We want to be bigger, faster, stronger right now, where there is a natural progression to develop and it takes time. All we're doing is getting the athlete to express their best self earlier for reasons driven, and then they can't sustain. Where if the athlete got to that point anyway, later when they're more developed from the ground up in all facets of a development, how an athlete develops, we wouldn't see these injuries. They're also overanalyzing skill. They're putting so much pressure on how they're doing things, and the kid doesn't quite know his body. He doesn't know how to access the skill. So I equate it to throwing a baby down a hallway and yelling at it to run.
All right, these are things, the answer to how you solve that, we're not going to be able to get to today, but we will have you back on. But those are the issues and things to keep your eye out for. Number 3, I'm really excited to hear what this is. What natal reflex are kids holding on to that's holding them back?
So there are reflexes that are ingrained innately in the body to help survival in the early part of life until we acquire some of the skill sets that will allow us to survive on our own. One of those happens to be, there's something called the Galant Reflex. When you stroke the spine of the baby will flex side to side. It's to help delivery. So as the baby's passing out of the canal, the skin on the spine is being stroked and it's just wiggling itself out. It's supposed to be diminished, integrated, we would say, by a year. They're retained 10, 11, 12-year-olds in my office. They're retained in some 50 or 60-year-olds. When those are still present, it means that there's paths in the brain that aren't developed. So coordination, balance, agility, also cognitive retention, creativity, some learning capacities are being affected because these reflexes aren't integrated. And one of the big ones is when the chairs at the schools are stimulating the backs of the kids, they're fidgeting and they're told to sit still. And now they're labeled with some sort of an attention syndrome. And all they are is just responding normally to something that should have been integrated well before then.
And to get rid of that or to help that, what kinds of things, real quick, because I know we got a lot more to cover here, can someone do?
To integrate something, you got to stimulate it. And stimulate is movement and motion and free play and some of the things we get into in the book. But that's literally it. We need to bring back some of those the thousands of repetitions of movements that babies started with. We're supposed to continue it on.
Great. We have a question or a comment from Melanie. I have an 11-year-old that needed 6 months of physical therapy from Osgood Schlatter. So she's just sharing that information. Obviously interested in what you have to say. All right, moving on to number 4. How can you instantly tell if an athlete and their parents will stick with your program when they walk into your office?
So I'm very observant. It's just the nature of what I do. And so even there's about a 20-yard walk from the parking lot to my office, and I'll just observe kind of who's coming in. I'll notice things like, are the kid and the parent walking together? Are they engaged? Is the child staring at his phone? Is he disconnected? Kind of slouched? Does he seem like he wants to come in here? And who wants to come in? I kind of get a beat on what's going on. Now, when I have that first conversation on my couch, I'm picking up on a lot of things in between. Does the parent answer for the child when I'm asking questions about, habits and stuff? It's a lot of these little nuances that can really tell me a lot about who I'm dealing with, how exactly to bring it to make it digestible, because every single person is different and it has to be individualized, not necessarily the information, but how I go about delivering that information to those 2, 3, or the whole family, hopefully.
So it's not that they can't get it through. It's just you might have to, you see the ones you're going to have to work a little harder.
Absolutely.
All right, next one, number 5. What is the one test that measures everything you need to know about an athlete, regardless of age, gender, or sport?
So this is in the book, and this is not, there's no way we're going to be able to go over this, but in detail. But I had thought if there was some sort of a physical standards test to even just try out for sports, that would be phenomenal. If you had to be at a certain capacity just to be able to try out for all sports in the nation, it would weed out a lot of people initially with lower participation. But when they weren't able to participate, they'd go home and would be working on these things that are very identifiable by anybody, not just a professional. And then we revisit. Hospitals used to have a physical standards exam to be able to work in an emergency room. They got rid of that rule because they couldn't facilitate employees because the decline of the function of the American human was going down. So they changed the standard. So it's a 9-test approach that any parent can run their kid through, and they can test them and see exactly where they fit. And what's great is just an eye opener because my kid's an amazing athlete, and I've worked with a lot of NFL players, a lot of NBA and NHL, and you see that they're able to perform at that level from a lot of things that are God-given, but they can't sustain at that level. And when I measure some of these things that are in the book, these 9 tests, it shows up and it's like you're operating at a 9-year-old functional capacity, but you're playing at the highest level of sport. Some things like a simple pull-up test, a push-up test, a prone plank, a cross-crawl kind of patterning test, standing on one leg, a gymnast bridge, a jump. There's a lot of these things that, again, you don't necessarily have to be a professional, but I'm giving to parents to be able to evaluate their athlete and get an idea of where we're starting from, and then a reevaluation later on to see how they're progressing.
Yeah, it goes back to, what they say, kids really need to learn how to play, literally climb, jump, do the kid stuff before you're putting them in soccer. And if they don't, and if they skip some of those, what used to be real basic learning skills, it's going to affect them later. All right, so this one, how tech and the cell phone is sabotaging young athletes.
So we feel that I think everybody can kind of say that we're abusing technology, phones, cell phone use, but it's not so much just posturally or inactivity. The bits of information that are coming through cell phones into kids' eyes, and their brains are having to interpret these bits of information, it's increasing a fight or flight response. When the fight or flight response increases, the immune system drops. So they can't fight bacteria and viruses, cancer cells, and repair tissue that is just normal in a growing athlete who's participating in a variety of sports or free play. So technology and staring at a phone is fatiguing the person and ramping up and lowering the immune system. And it's more profound than just my kid's kind of hunched over and he's inactive. It goes so far beyond that.
All right, that's a scary one for most parents, I'm sure, of teenagers. How overanalyzing a kid's performance to make them a better athlete will do the exact opposite.
So we talked a little bit about this earlier. It's like we're evaluating skills in athletes. We're metrically computer enhanced. We're trying to measure all these angles and these velocities and what's going on. But the skill is, if you think about it in a pyramid form, the skill's at the top of the pyramid. We're evaluating a skill that is just a culmination of a bunch of movements done on an athletic setting to express a skill. Because kicking a soccer ball is really just a bunch of flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, brace, push, pull. To the brain, it's just these collection of movements. We're evaluating these skills, but the kids aren't prepared to express them. So we're criticizing something that they can't change anyway. And then it increases that stress response we were talking about. Now it's like, I can't make the change. It's not that you're just defiant or you take a little longer than others. We're measuring things that we should not be measuring in youth. Again, I equate it to throwing an infant down a hallway, telling it to fire its hips, yelling at it to run. And the infant's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how to get there yet.
And so you basically, what you're saying is they need to learn the steps before you can even start at that point to be upset with it. It doesn't make any sense.
It sounds like a paradox, right? It's like they leave the skill to get better at the skill, but it's not leave the skill and then they go prepare it. Next time they revisit the skill, it's that much better. It's so much easier. There's an aha moment for the kids. Like, Wait, that's what you're asking of me? Yeah.
Okay, weekly warning signs that your child may need to dial back on their sports.
You can see, like, are they enthusiastic still? Are they unenthusiastic? How's their sleep? How's their eating? You can watch them, though. Subconsciously, the brain, it's an interesting thing because I'll see people kind of move their bodies and it's what their brain wants them to do. So I don't deny that, but you'll see a kid, he'll be touching a certain area of his body and he or she doesn't know that they're doing that. But you can pick up on some of these things. And then just have a conversation with them. Sit down. The biggest thing about the book I love is it's empowering the parent and the kid to really connect back with themselves so that we're developing these athletes more connected to themselves, because the athletic portion of their life, the sports portion, is this in the grand scheme of it. So we're trying to like prepare them to be able to connect with themselves and know, stuff's off. I just feel off. I don't feel acclimated. I don't feel, something's got to go in. Hey, how you feeling? And then we can look at what their sporting or nutrition and rethink this whole thing and what their recovery is and tech and all these other aspects that we're asking. But it brings back the conversation and connecting again with your child just from observing.
Okay, we have Tom with a question and a statement. Great topic. Who is your guest? So I just put up your lower third. Tom, it is Dr. Tommy John. He works out of San Diego. His father is the famous Tommy John, who the surgery was named after. And he has dedicated his life's work now to helping kids with injury prevention and so much more as we're talking right now. Thank you, Tom. Great question. All right, moving on. The 4 questions all parents need to ask themselves. Oh, wait, hold on. Tom said, what's the book? Do you have a name yet? Tom, it's coming out. Everybody, it's coming out in the summer. It's not out yet. Do we have a name for it, a title?
We do have a name. It's Minimize Injury, Maximize Performance, a Sports Parent Survival Guide. And it's actually, you can pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, Google Play. So it's out there right now. You can pre-order it, but it's coming out June 5th.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks again, Tom. All right, the 4 questions all parents need to ask themselves.
So it's one of those things. Are you playing sport because are your kids involved in sports because it's convenient? That's one question. Out of convenience. Are your kids playing sports because the other parents have their kids playing sports? Are your kids playing sports because it was a previous sport that you played back when you were young? And are your kids playing sports because you want them to go pro? There's just some of those questions that you can ask yourself to really get an idea, to sometimes troubleshoot that, am I a part? Is there something that I can change at home here just so that I don't become a statistic, because things are getting worse and the efforts are things just aren't changing?
Yeah, those are questions. A lot of us could probably answer all of the above. Right. To a lot of those and others. You know, sometimes it's a mixed bag of stuff, but including some of those for sure. All right, the last one, certainly something that a lot of people worry about: why parents need to say no to sports specialization.
So it's actually, there was an article in Forbes that just came out 2 days ago, and they talked about sports specialization is playing a sport for 8 months or more a year. So participating in sport 8 months or more a year. Over 70% of Olympians were multiple sport athletes. Over 90% of the NFL draft played multiple sports. I've worked with NFL, like I said, many NFL players I've worked with high-end athletes. The best at their levels all played multiple sports. Now, besides the fact that the brain does better in development playing on different surfaces, different rules, using the body in different ways, coordinating, and it's a group activity, it's a one-on-one activity. But more profoundly, in this Forbes article, they found that a higher percentage of the multi-sport athletes ate breakfast, got more than 7 hours of sleep, had self-esteem boosts, self-efficacy, less loneliness. They were better performing human beings because they participated in, and it was like a 14,000 participant study of where they analyzed 12th graders. And this was just, the percentages were so profound, but it's so much more than just injuries. Like, it's an elbow in some people, or it's a knee in some people, but it's the lives of these kids, because they will be fathers, they will be mothers, they will be They want lives. The sports are such a small component to it. So if we can avoid specializing, meaning one sport for 8 months or more a year, the better, and it has a profound impact of the entire health of that human athlete.
And it's such an important one, and I think everyone agrees the problem, and we're in that too, is how you do that. The demands of some of the, I mean, you really have to buck the system at this point. If your kid is, you know, a good athlete and playing at, you know, on top teams, it's just very difficult to do. And I think that's the question we're all searching for, how to do that. I know we're not going to get the answers today. How can people find out more about you, even possibly work with you directly? Please tell us how they can do that.
So you can go to my website, drtommyjohn.com, drtommyjohn.com. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook at drtommyjohn.com. Another thing that I've been utilizing with pretty good success is I can do FaceTime or Skype and do rehab and training because of how I approach injuries. So I've worked with people in Australia, the UK, and nationwide here for a variety of subjects in a variety of athletes or humans at all different ages with some success. So I can be in your living rooms or in your office or in your yards to work with you. So reach out to me through the website. If there's a problem, don't sit on it. Ask me a question. I'll give you information. Just reach out to me. There's an open line of communication from now on, and follow me on social media.
All right, I really appreciate your time. We're going to have you back. We're going to talk about your other 3 prongs to helping with this problem, which is replenish, rebuild, and recovery. Those will all be their own 10-minute topics. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. And thank you, everyone who was commenting and reacting while we did this. It makes it a lot more enjoyable and interactive to have you guys. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.